At this time, we've got one more panel discussion left, and I am so excited to have this conversation. It's one that personally um, I'm interested in, and probably kind of the most seeking of, what are the answers? um, I'm going to bring on Miss Jess Estrada, Mrs. Jess Estrada here. And quick introduction. Jess is a digital marketing strategist based in Seattle. She created freshjess.com in 2008 to offer a unique perspective on life, on health, and style in the Pacific Northwest. By day, she works as the manager of digital communications for Pivotal Ventures, a Melinda Gates company. Jess, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and we can see you now. Welcome.
Perfect.
Yay.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm just honored to have you. And really excited about this conversation. I know I mentioned when we were chatting before that I personally am an extrovert, and this time of, quarantine and isolation and just, kind of withdrawing for safety reasons has been terribly trying on me. And now we're about to enter into, the season, particularly in the Northwest, where it already is isolating. We already, don't really want to spend as much time outside or be out and about, and it's cold and really more insular. And so like I said, I'm looking for, I guess, just thoughts and ideas and new places to make my mind go, to really know how to prepare and I guess get outside of my box when it comes to connections and really filling that social meter for me. And I'm excited about this conversation, and then afterwards we'll be able to open it up to everyone and really continue the discussion at the group. So that's kind of where I'm at. Tell us about you and kind of what that lens looks like for you.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that I'm an introverted extrovert. I definitely get my energy from being around people. I have a big Filipino family, and we see each other all the time. Big meaning, not just like I'm the oldest of five, so not just my siblings and my parents, but like all of our aunts and uncles and cousins. And so this year has been very interesting, to say the least, without, that family party time that I'm used to and the gatherings. But I also have appreciated this time for having, just this space to kind of have to myself, and to do a lot of things that I kind of push off to the side, or do, or distract myself with other things. So I've been doing like a lot more reading, a lot more journaling, but definitely have had to get a lot more creative. I'm feeling the same way you are, where, the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. It's colder outside. And I miss seeing my friends. I miss seeing my coworkers in person, even though I see them all day on a screen. It's just different. And I went through this process in 2019 of getting and then starting the job at Pivotal Ventures. And so I felt like I was spending all of last year intentionally isolated, because I was trying to focus on getting the job, and then like getting in, like used to and the rhythm and flow of work. And so right when the pandemic hit, I feel like I was just getting back in the swing of like seeing my friends normally again. And so that really sucked. But I am not normally a lengthy or a regular texting person. I'm very like short, and like I'm a person who sometimes will just see a text during in between meetings or something, and then forget to text you back. And so I've just been trying to be more intentional of like, when I am thinking of a friend or I want to see if they would be interested in getting together, I'll text them or I'll send them an email or a message on social media. And I think we have to just kind of get out of our own heads of like, you know, how long has it been since I've seen or talked to someone? And we're all stuck in our homes, I think. And uh, just being open about, letting people know that you're thinking about them, and being honest and open about boundaries too of, are you willing to hang out and grab coffee? I like to think in Seattle that we have a somewhat mild climate. So even though it's colder and it gets darker earlier, um, that we are able to get outside a lot more often than maybe others. And so I'm trying to even get out of my own head of oh, it's cold outside, and just sucking it up and bundling up to go see a friend, grab coffee and walk around together. So, we're doing things differently, but I feel like just kind of thinking outside of the box a bit, or doing things that you wouldn't normally do, not in a pandemic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And it's really interesting that so this is the third session, and all three times the word boundaries has come up,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting to me. So I wanted to, I kind of want to touch on that and transition to the next question is, how we maintain our relationships while keeping those boundaries, right? What does that look like? And so you talked about texting and reaching out and finding out, how can we do a coffee date in a way that's safe and like making sure you're on the same page. But can you go into maybe a little bit of specifics on kind of what that looks like, where you're honoring yourself and your boundaries as far as safety precautions, but also doing what's needed to make sure you're filling your social cup.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that my husband and I live on Capitol Hill, and so we chose this neighborhood because we love walking around and being in the city. Before the pandemic, we were heavy users of the light rail and public transit, and so in a pandemic, we are still um, getting our walks and getting out there. We're still comfortable with getting takeout from restaurants. I will say though that I'm personally uncomfortable with being inside of a restaurant. I'll go in and like pick something up, but that's about it. And I think everyone's boundaries are different. I have friends who um, have essentially not left the house since March and have barely, will barely go outside unless it's for something absolutely, crucial. Like I have a friend who does her best to not leave the house, but her mother-in-law is in a nursing home, and so they'll socially distance and go see her. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I have friends who it feels like the pandemic is not a thing for them. And they're still, every time I see them on social media, they're with a different group of people hanging out like it's nothing, and they're still traveling. So I'm likely not seeing those friends. But for the friends that, I do want to make time for, I think, again, just being open and honest about where your boundaries are. Like, I'd be willing to go get a COVID test if it meant seeing some of my family members. I don't think we as a family, we've decided it's not good for all of us to get together, because that means like 50 people in a room, and that's just not good. But from our immediate family or small groups, like I'm related to a lot of essential workers, and so they are regularly getting COVID tested anyway. I think that's kind of a big thing. I have friends who are just not comfortable because they're not sure if they might potentially get their parents sick or older relatives. And so it's just really knowing where your boundaries are, where your friends' boundaries are, and then making do. I think I've probably met with people twice, both family and both in private homes. And those were early on in the pandemic for Mother's Day and then for my brother's birthday. Thanksgiving and Christmas will be interesting this year.
Yeah.
But again, I've been texting a lot more with friends. I have a couple of friends who we've been writing letters this year, which has been really fun to do. It feels like having a pen pal, like when we were younger. FaceTime and Zoom and things like that. I never used to FaceTime people, but now it's kind of a regular thing because you're not seeing them in person. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. I think I've been doing a lot of outside dates, like in the summertime, just going for walks. The University Village is really great for that. We'll take our dog down there and go walking around all the time. And I try to minimize like having to talk to people, like strangers and people I'm not related to, aside from like takeout or whatever. But I think kind of just like places like the U Village where there's people out and about, but kind of in passing and not really interacting with me and my friend or my husband and dog. I'm okay with stuff like that. So it's just kind of like knowing your boundaries.
Right.
I remember getting my haircut back in June, and they had just opened up the salon, and there was 6 people in a massive space, and I was still like super nervous. And I think you kind of just have to like learn and go, learn as you go. But we all have them, and we're all learning them, whether we know it or not.
That's a really good point. I mean, you talked about knowing and understanding what your own personal boundaries are. And I mean, beyond just talking about safety and, related to the pandemic, but just about what your boundaries and even your needs are in terms of socializing and relationships. A previous panel talked about how you can show up differently when you're around different people. And that's just part of human nature and what we do. If we're talking to our friends and family versus talking to a coworker, we bring a different person, but I think that's a boundary there. Because, I don't need my coworkers to know every aspect of my life. Except for you, Andrea, you can know everything now. but understanding what that is, and maybe I think as an extrovert and as an external processor myself, I tend to lean toward, whoever I come into contact with, you get it all, you get the whole me. And, I kind of appreciate that about myself because I feel like I'm authentic, but at the same time, there is some boundaries needed there. There is some protection there. And so whether we're talking about, being physically safe, or whether we're talking about just our own emotional and, mental safety and our safety of our health, the safety of our, personal health, internal health. I think knowing those boundaries it's a key first step. But then communicating them, when it comes to your different friends, of like the ones who are going out and hanging out with all different people, that's a conversation that may need to be had of like, hey, you know what? Sorry, I'm not gonna join you, but I can write you a letter, or we can text, or we can have a face chat. But being willing to communicate that once you have those boundaries is probably going to be really key.
Yeah. I will say I spend most of my days, as probably many of you do, with my coworkers. And so they're probably the ones who are learning and helping me learn my boundaries, as the body language cues that are normally there in in office workspace aren't there anymore. And so I feel like we've been a lot more honest about saying like, today is just super hard, or I've been in front of the screen in back-to-back meetings for hours, and it really gets to people. It's a lot more draining than being in-person meetings, and so I think I'm really grateful to have a works place that has that's made it as safe a space as possible to have those kinds of conversations, and so we are able to be vulnerable with each other. Which has helped me kind of translate that to other parts of my life of, you know, my Filipino family, we don't normally talk like that of like, you know, this has just been really hard for me. And so I've been able to find the words and the confidence to to talk like that in front of my family, and to be more honest in front of my friends. Whereas before, I think we may have been more amenable to saying yes when we're tired or whatever. Um, I'm one, you know, silver lining out of all of the George Floyd protests and the anti-racism kind of reckoning that I feel like society is having is learning where these boundaries are rooted, and just whether that's through um, just colonizational trauma, or just experiences that I've had as a woman of color, that I'm realizing, you know, that's the root of why I'm experiencing things differently from my white coworkers, or my Black coworkers even, or other people of color. So I feel like I'm just learning a lot more about boundaries in general, in addition to who I am. So in the many layers of this pandemic,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know, we have like we have like actual COVID, the illness, we have mental health, and we have now, you know, racism and social justice that we're all kind of like um, faced with. And so I feel like we're just learning a lot about who we are, and boundaries are certainly part of that.
And then being, you know, or at least feeling like you're stuck with yourself, right? So that's something that most of us haven't had to deal with. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of introverts in my life, or people who just really enjoy their quiet time, and they already have kind of that lifestyle set up. I mean, my husband, except for not having to leave the house to go to work, he's basically living his same life. He's like, I'm never going to a grocery store again. I'm always going to order my groceries online now forever. But that's definitely not me. And so really like being faced with like just spending much larger quantities of time with my own self than I really ever had to or wanted to be honest. um, there's been a lot of growth, and I think, you know, I think Christian mentioned this, I think several people have mentioned this, of really like um, that relationship with that you have with yourself is really showing up right now. It's really kind of rearing its head. And if it's not good, if I, you know, I'm learning, I don't know that I've ever just enjoyed my own company before. And and that's why I feel like I'm so missing out, because I kind of rely on being able to be around other people or communicate with other people to get my enjoyment, um, as opposed to really stepping back and saying, okay, well, I like me as a person. I like spending time. It's okay if I'm just spending time with myself. So I'm learning how to do that. And I guess I feel like as we're coming into this new season, um, you know, what are ways that maybe you are finding or thinking that you'll really tap into that portion of like filling your own relational needs? You know, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Um, I think for me and maybe for others, I think this pandemic kind of surfaces all the ways that we look to distract ourselves. For me, that's social media, which it's a double-edged sword because social media is a big part of my job.
Yeah.
It's how I built my, you know, kind of like my Fresh Jess reputation with my blog, and built my community on the various social media platforms.
That's
And
how we met.
it's how we met, and how I stay engaged with you and with many others. Um, and at the same time, you know, if you're not careful and you don't set boundaries, again, you know, you can easily lose way too much time, just kind of scrolling and keeping up with everyone else versus kind of
Yeah.
filling your own cup. And so um, I, you know, a year ago, I would really relish kind of weekends and free time to relax, because to me, I was like, I'm so tired from work that all I want to do is read a book. And now in a pandemic, I've been spending a lot more time in like journaling through just things I'm feeling and just questions. I feel like I follow a lot of people who are just really great about, thinking through reflection and things like that. And so I keep a lot of these, I keep like a tab of like journal prompts in my notes, and just kind of think through writing various questions, and just kind of like trying to write my way through this pandemic, which I probably should start doing on Fresh Jess again, but I always say that, and then I just find other things to do.
Of course.
But reading, writing, I've been thinking a lot about mindful movement and mindful eating. I'm sure many of us have fallen into like at least in the early days for me, the pandemic of like, I'm home all day, I'm just going to keep snacking all day long. And just kind of getting back to that, like eating, just, eating what I know nourishes me and makes me feel good. And you and I have been friends over social media for many years. So that I love like Orange Theory and working out. And in a pandemic, when we can't go anywhere, Orange Theory won't be open for a while. That's been really hard for me. But just learning that, a good 30 minutes of yoga is just as great, or going for a walk is good for the body as well as kind of just like relaxing the mind. And so I'm just kind of not being so hard on myself, so to speak, in making myself work out every day, and kind of expanding what that means to me. And just, I'm grateful to have this time to have self-reflection. I understand that, many others may not look at this time in the same way, but I think, I'm sure that mental health has been mentioned before today. I mentioned it earlier. I think so much about how our mental health is affecting all of us. I'm really glad that I feel like it's been a lot more normalized than maybe even just a few years ago. And so we're all willing to talk about it more. And I think we are not used to being stuck at home. And for me personally, I feel like I'm trying to unlearn pushing myself and like the culture of grinding and hustling so much, and just learning how to make space to be present and just to relax and not and just be more mindful in all aspects of my life. And that's one aspect of mental health. I feel like we're all just kind of seeing the tip of the iceberg in how this pandemic is affecting us in that sense. So
Yeah. You talked about, and I've heard you say a couple of times now, kind of getting out of the box or expanding our thinking about the ways that we approach certain things, specifically, whether it's exercise or getting out. What are ways, I kind of want to shift a bit to kind of that outdoors and physical movement aspect. So you were talking about exercising, but you also talked about going for a walk with a friend, or, being outdoors. How What's that gonna look like for you now as, we get colder? I know you mentioned kind of saying, okay, well, I can put a bigger coat on, but like, what are things that people can do, whether it's in terms of with a friend or a relationship, but or even just for our personal movement benefits, when we feel like we can't go outside, even just just because of the weather, right? What are things that we can do? How can we approach that?
yeah, I think if going outside just isn't an option for whatever reason, I think we have so much at our fingertips just on YouTube and on the internet, and whatever your level of fitness or movement is, I think there's something that you can do, whether it's stretching. I recommend Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. And I'm sure you're familiar, but Adriene with one N. She's so funny. She's great. And I love that for the most part, she's very gentle. And so I can recommend her to like my family who didn't grow up doing yoga, but now is obviously a little bit older. Many of them have like arthritis. And just, you know, I feel like she has something for everyone. But there's so many different yoga channels. I have bookmarked, she's Seattle based. Her Instagram name is Curvy Curl, and I'm blanking on her her real name, but she's pretty great for like high intensity, light weights or no weight workouts. Orange Theory has at home YouTube videos, which are really great that I've been using. Pop Sugar Fitness, I've been a big fan of for many years. They have a whole plethora of videos that you can kind of work off of. I feel like, you know, if you have access to YouTube, you can find a lot of different types of workouts to get you through. And if anything, just, you know, I hope that people can get out and get some fresh air and go for walks. I'm not even like a big outdoorsy person, but getting outside even just for a few minutes I feel like has been so helpful for me. And again, I feel like Seattle for the most part is pretty mild in that it's not going to, it's not going to get, it'll rain a lot, but it's not going to get to the point where we can't be outside even for a few minutes. And so hopefully you can enjoy a walk or two in this fall and winter. But you know, if you have a set of stretches that you kind of committed to memory, I mean, just trying to get into a routine of that. That's something that I'm trying to get to, is stretching at least a little bit every day and just committing something to memory so that I don't have to like look something up. My husband and I did get a bike so that we can spin at home. So we did cave and became one of those. But
that's commitment.
That is commitment. And honestly, like I've gotten my half out of that bike already, just since I think we got it in like July. And I'm on it more days than not during the week. But I'm also doing a lot more yoga and just walking around than I used to. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. And I would add to the YouTube yoga channel is Yoga by Biala. She's also Seattle based.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's great.
And I'll put some links in there too. I think I found, let me know if I got the right one, the Curvy Girl, I put in the chat. But I'll put the other YouTube channels that we just mentioned in there too.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. She's great.
But one thing that I was just kind of thinking of, we're talking of being outdoors. And I know that, you know, I started gardening a few years back, and I feel like so many people have gotten on the plants and gardening trend since being home. And so I definitely have spent more time in my yard. And that actually has really been, I'd say it's really been key to my sanity these last 6 months, of being able to go outside, you know, get my hands in the dirt, or, you know, water some plants. I grew fruits and vegetables, so pick a little bit of produce, and really just connecting with nature in that way was, I would almost say that helped to fill that kind of connection bucket for me. Even though there was another person, I do find that when I'm working in the yard, I talk to myself, and I talk out loud to myself when I'm working in the yard. So maybe that is me spending time with me. When I'm in nature, I'm okay with spending time with me. And so I've been thinking, okay, what am I going to do? You know, I'm not growing anything anymore. The last bits of thing, I try to do some fall crops. My lettuce isn't very happy right now, but you know, am I still willing to go out if it's raining and check on things? Maybe I'll go, you know, clean up a little bit of weeds or something. I would like to say that I will, but I know that, like I said, played a big role for me since springtime. And it's different. I think it was Andrea got me a gift, me and my kids a gift. It's Up in the Garden, Down in the Dirt. It's a kid's book, but it's beautifully illustrated. It's called Up in the Garden, Down in the Dirt. And it just really reminded me of, it basically just goes through the seasons. And this little girl who is with her grandmother and helps in the garden, but they talk about, you know, I'm planting this seed in the ground, but then under the ground, here's what's happening. You know, the roots are growing, the water is going, to the seed, or here are the bugs that are contributing in the soil, and then back on top, now, and just going through the seasons. And it's just a really beautiful illustration of, regardless of what season we're in or what we see above ground, there is still so much going on underground, even when things seem dormant. And so I kind of used that book as inspiration when I was thinking about this event and planning, and kind of what my own personal intention was. I wanted to find out, or make a decision, what am I going to plant now? Because there are a lot of crops that you plant in the fall for the spring. Mm-hmm. And you intentionally plant it now when things are going to be cold, and when it's going to be months before we see the results of that at all. But if you don't do the planting now, you don't see the results in the spring. And so kind of thinking about relationships, right? That's something that's really important to me. What am I going to do now in the fall, in the times where it seems harder and colder and more isolated, so that I can reap the harvest of having the relationships that I want, in 2021. I don't have that answer yet, but I think even just being mindful of that, and asking myself the question, gets me to the point of doing something about it more often than not.
For sure. And I feel like if it moves you to connect with others in this time, very difficult time for all of us, I think you should definitely, in your way, reach out to others, but also making space. I think it's really important to also pay attention to, how you're doing, and giving yourself the space and time to just kind of deal with all that's going on, and understand that, again, this is a difficult time for everyone. And so we're all figuring out how to keep our cup filled, so to speak. And I think, planting those seeds of connection starts with making sure that your own seeds for yourself are healthy. And so I think a lot about that when I am, at my own boundaries, and while I want to see people, it's hard. And I think we definitely have to acknowledge that as well. And I'm definitely one to want to text people often and say, hey, I'm thinking of you lately, more than I used to, for sure. But at the same time, I'm grateful to have this time and space to kind of take it day by day, and acknowledge the days when I'm not as willing to be as connected, and I need to spend more time on my own self. So yeah.
That is one of the things I'm gonna say this last point. I'll let you say any final thoughts before we bring in the whole group here. But somebody earlier just made the comment of, we're human, we're so such dynamic beings, and we're never gonna be, fully one thing all the time. Like you were just saying, some days I'm going to be the person that is reaching out to friends. Hey, I thought of you. Other days I'm going to be the one that wants somebody reaching out to me. and that's okay. And really being gentle with ourselves about that. The first panel, we talked about prioritizing you, and saying, I'm not a slave to X, to work, to my kids, to my spouse, to the chores, right? I'm not a slave to that. Yes, it is, something that I do and that I engage in, but it's okay if I stop for a minute and take a break. It's perfectly fine. And actually, I'm gonna put up real quick a slide that I was gonna save this for later, but let's see here. I want to put this up because I really liked it. She believed she could, but she was tired. So she rested, and you know what? The world went on, and it was okay. She knew she could try again tomorrow.
I love it.
I love that so much.
Me too.
Because we always see the other one. She believed she could, so she did, right? Which is great. It's motivating, but it's not every day.
I love that so much.
Any final thoughts for you before we bring in the group?
Just thank you for having this discussion and for making the space for this. I think, just this is something we're going to be in for a while. And so I think just being intentional, and also just staying in tune as much as you can with yourself, and the connections you do want or need to make,
Yeah.
with others as well as within. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jess, so much.